Chimaev versus Bo Nickal. Guys, the only thing that I'm impressed here with is that Bo Nickal, who's not debuted in the UFC, can keep a topic going about himself versus Chimaev. I mean, there's an art to that. There truly is. And I don't know that Bo had some great strategy and he planned this out. I think maybe on accident he fell into something really great, but I've got to observe it either way. I mean, I do have to give a real good look to the fact that a guy who has never fought in the octagon is now being compared and by many argued will be able to beat a guy who's never lost in the octagon. That's interesting, and that's a great job by Bo. Now he's got big Daniel Cormier weighing in on it. And Daniel Cormier, as a wrestler, as a wrestling coach, as somebody that really understands wrestling, particularly as it crosses over and pertains to MMA, brought himself in on it when he was talking about Bo. And he said, you know what, hold on. Bo's a better wrestler than Chimaev. If they went and had a wrestling match, Bo would prove that by beating Chimaev. But in MMA, you're talking about something very different. And then he talked about himself. He said, you know, I had a really hard time taking down Jon Jones, but on paper for wrestling, I am far more decorated. Now, Daniel didn't really expand on that, but you understand what he's talking about. You understand he's talking about a difference and how do you get those holds to carry over. And it would be tough to know. Look, Chimaev has taken everybody off their feet except for one guy. He did not take Merchant off his feet because he knocked him out with a hook instead. But he's taken everybody else off their feet, but he's done it the same way. The same setup, the same range, the same placement in the octagon, and the same double leg. Now, a double leg is the greatest move in all of wrestling. It's a basic move, sure. It'd be much more sophisticated and complex to learn a low single, for sure. But a double leg is the single greatest move in wrestling. You grab both legs. The guy can't sprawl. The guy now has those legs. You took them both away. I mean, the double leg is the great move, and it's the one that Chimaev goes to. Now, Nickal, even in his brief moments that he's been in there, even if you were to look at his last fight, like, it's really hard for me to explain to you on the takedown that Bo did in his last match on the Contender Series how absolutely complex that is. To be stepping one side with a punch, disguising your closing of range behind strikes, to cut back the other way, your hand has to be in the perfect spot. Bo Nickal's hand is 2 inches higher, 2 inches lower. That opponent doesn't fall down. So in the middle of chaos, in the middle of throwing a punch, you've got to cut back. By the way, you've got to post on his chest with one hand. You've got to hit the exact right spot with your right hand. And he did them all. Now, that's small and that's limited. But if you can take somebody down like that, I would imagine you could, of course, do the most basic rule in wrestling, which is a double leg. But I get Daniel's point. I get where they don't cross over. I get where it's not about who the better wrestler is. And I used to think that it was. And Daniel doesn't have to stop at Jon Jones. Daniel could also bring in the fact that he couldn't get Stipe down. A very difficult time getting Stipe down. So I really do understand what the Big Bear is talking about, for sure. But would it carry over to these two? And I hope I did not sound dismissive of Chimaev's wrestling by saying all he's done to everybody is a double leg. You should always start with your best hold. And if a guy can't stop it right, St. Pierre, who goes down as the greatest MMA wrestling we've ever seen, took absolutely everybody off their feet. Oh, by the way, wasn't stuffed very many times. There wasn't a lot of air balls by St. Pierre, but it was that same technique right into a double. He finished it different. He came up on his toes. He finished it different. But it was still the same technique, and he still got to it. Look, Mike Tyson's career is cloaked the same way. Everybody knew about that uppercut. Everybody knew about that hook. Nobody could stop that uppercut. Nobody could stop that hook. And I don't argue for you right now that Chimaev's wrestling is obvious. It's simple. I'm arguing for you that he's been able to do the same technique, and I would suspect he has many more. Once those are countered, he will then go to option B. Once that's countered, he will go to option C. He will then rinse and repeat and start back at 1, go to 2, go to 3. The same thing that Nickal's doing. So I do understand Daniel's point. I understand it fully. But I don't know that we've seen enough from either guy. We keep talking about Nickal doesn't have the experience. Where is Chimaev's? I mean, with what experience are you talking about with Chimaev? He's had 6 fights. He's been in the octagon 20 minutes. So he has 20 minutes more experience. Bo's never been in there, and Chimaev's been in there for 20 minutes. What experience is it that you're referring to? If there was any other fighters and they were separated by 20 minutes in a specific realm, which in this case is the octagon, is that going to matter to you? I mean, what if I was to tell you And you guys are telling me that Islam can beat Charles. What if I was to tell you that Charles has been in the octagon for a little over 2 hours and Islam has been in there under 30 minutes? Now you're talking about a discrepancy of 400%. Bo's down, percentage-wise on experience, 20 minutes. All of a sudden, that 20 minutes doesn't start to matter, does it? Charles Oliveira has been in there 4 times longer than Islam, but Islam's the favorite. So what happened to your experience argument? What happened to your argument about he's not ready? What is it that gets you ready? Is it rounds? Is it opponent? Is there time in there? What is it that gets you ready? Now, I know the answer. I'm just wondering if you do. Because a moment ago, the collective community told me that Bo doesn't have the experience to take on Chimaev. They're separated by 20 minutes. And now I'm bringing to you that Charles has 400% more experience than Islam, but you're telling me Islam should win. What happened to your argument about the experience? And experience, of course, doesn't have to do with rounds. And of course, it doesn't care who your opponent is. It does matter whether you walked in there or not. It does matter the travel, the weigh-ins, the media, warming up in the locker room and going out. That's true. I agree with that. But I'm wondering what happened to the people's argument. Or saying that Bo doesn't have the experience with Chimaev. Look, we're not going to get to that point. It's not going to be Bo versus Chimaev. I respect the fact that Bo was able to connect himself and cling so close for so long to the debate. I really do appreciate that. There's a skill in that. And Chimaev, who's been a master of the media for 3 straight years, is also going to have to tip his hat to that and say, well done. But as far as the overwhelming argument that not only is that fight not going to happen, it shouldn't happen because they have different levels of experience. They're separated by 20 minutes. What do you have to say now?